Josh is going to go ahead. He is going to take the odd teams. So team number 1, team number 3, team number 5, team number 7, team number 9. I'm going to take the evens 2 through 10, and we are going to do a live mock draft for the first 10 picks of the 2024 NFL draft. If we did all 32, as you saw, I did this week on Brandon's World, it would take about 2 hours. So we're not going to have time for that. We're just going to do the first 10 picks. Trades are going to be involved. The general manager for each team will be allowed to make whatever trade they feel comfortable with. And so, as always, here in my best Roger Goodell voice, with the chime going in the background, Mr. Unger and the Chicago Bears are on the clock with the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft.
Well, as you and I were just talking about, this feels like the only surefire thing. With the first pick, championship rings, NFL mock draft 2024, the Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams, quarterback, USC. I mean, they traded Justin Fields. The Bears haven't had a franchise quarterback in, God, I don't know how long. It feels like it's been a century at this point. They've got weapons at the skill position group, or throughout the skill position group, and now it feels like you just need that quarterback.
So here's a fun fact for you. The Chicago Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer in a season, and they have never had a quarterback throw for 30 touchdowns in a season. I believe both of those could be broken next year by that man who you just drafted, who I agree with you will be the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. I know there is some concern. I have brought on guests on Brandon's World over the last month who have told me flat out they have concerns about Caleb Williams' character and the way that he's sort of been entitled and the way that he's treated some media questions. And I get it, but I think that he is a Patrick Mahomes level talent. I think he is the ultimate eraser. And depending on, I'm very interested in what you do with their number 9 pick later in the draft, because to me, if they get this right, I think Caleb Williams can be the savior and become instantly, potentially, the best talent in Chicago sports.
So, I get what you're saying with that. Caleb has shown a lot of potential in college, but for me, a lot of this is going to be dependent on the Bears' offensive coordinator designing an offense that fits Caleb Williams' skill set. That's my biggest issue with a lot of these offensive coordinators in the NFL when they draft a quarterback or when they sign a quarterback, whatever. They don't design an offense that fits that quarterback's skill set. You know, I could go back to, for example, when the Titans drafted Marcus Mariota, it felt like Tennessee tried to design an offense that fit Marcus Mariota. Whereas on the flip side, when the Browns drafted Colt McCoy out of Texas, it felt like they were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Speaking of designing an offense for somebody that fits your system, I believe this guy fits Washington's system more. So I'm going to go ahead and make my selection. With the number 2 pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders will select quarterback Jaden Daniels out of LSU. The current Heisman Trophy winner is obviously more mobile than Drake May. Drake May has those prototypical traits, right? 6'5", big, strong, can throw it down the field. Jaden Daniels, to me, he was very accurate. Needs to get a little bit better with that placement of the ball over the middle of the field. But I just think with his mobility, Terry McLaurin is still there. Austin Eckler now is his running back. Cliff Kingsbury in that air raid system is similar to what Jaden Daniels ran in college. Washington, we know, Dan Quinn now their new head coach. They beefed up their offensive line a little with Tyler Biadasz at center. I think they definitely need to improve on the interior and elsewhere on that offensive line. But if you're asking me, in today's NFL, do you want a more statue guy or a more mobile guy? Especially for Washington system, I'm taking Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I would agree with this. I feel like Washington has to, given what Philadelphia can do defensively, what Dallas can do defensively. We'll see if the Giants can beef up their defense. So Washington needs that quarterback who can escape the pocket, make plays on the run. So perfect fit, I would say, for Washington. But a lot of Raiders fans right now are very disappointed in you.
I'm very interested with this next pick that you have to make because to me, in my opinion, I do think Washington's going to draft Jaden. I think the Drake May thing is smokescreen. I would be shocked if they do draft Drake May. To me, this is where the draft really starts because New England is a very interesting decision.
Yeah, we could trade the pick here because we know Minnesota wants to come up. The Raiders are probably going to be calling us. But no, we're going to stay at number 3. And with the third pick in the 2024 Championship Rings NFL mock draft, the New England Patriots select quarterback J.J. McCarthy
Whoa!
out of Michigan. I'm doing this partially because I think he would be a good fit in New England, partially to screw over the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay, can I say this? This is no fault of J.J. McCarthy. This is no fault of Drake May. This is no fault of Bo Nix or Michael Penix, etc. In my opinion, I think the only quarterback who could work in New England is Caleb. Just because Caleb is so special. I think Jane Daniels' mobility would help, but they would need to get a lot more weapons around him. I think New England, they need to obviously get receivers, which again could change the trajectory of this pick if it is JJ McCarthy. But I think JJ McCarthy, even though he's a bona fide winner, and we talked about him a lot last year, we talked about Michigan football. I don't think he's going to work in that situation where he has limited resources around him. I think he'd be a disaster and a flat out bust if that's his landing spot.
I totally get what you're saying. He probably would work better in Minnesota, don't get me wrong. But I could see New England actually doing this because if you look, where did J.J. McCarthy play college? Michigan. Sure, Michigan doesn't get the same type of. Okay, we just lost Brandon there for a minute, but I'll continue. Sure, J.J. McCarthy played at University of Michigan, and Ann Arbor is there. You are. Ann Arbor doesn't get the same type of weather that Foxborough, Massachusetts does, but at the same time, I think J.J. McCarthy would be comfortable playing in those not so great, sloppy kind of conditions because he had to play in the Big Ten and go to like Columbus, West Lafayette, Bloomington, State College, Madison, wherever the University of Minnesota is. I
For
think it,
For sure he would. And for the record there, I apologize. I slipped on my mouse track and I accidentally clicked the back button, so it backed me out of the tab. But with that being said, I don't know. I think JJ McCarthy needs a Minnesota. I think he needs a Denver. I think he needs an offensive coach and a lot of talent around him. And I think New England would just be an awful place. I get he'd be comfortable playing there. I just don't think he would succeed there.
I I do hear what you're saying, but by the same token, he wasn't the center of attention when it came to the offense at Michigan. It was run the ball and have JJ McCarthy make the big plays when he needed to. Not
He
necessarily.
also had a great offensive line and a really good coach behind him, which he's not going to have in New England.
And you also have a valid point there. I could totally see the Patriots going Drake May here, but as I've heard, from what I've heard, Drake May, it may take him a year or two to fully get into NFL mode, whatever that means. Whereas JJ McCarthy would be a bona fide day one starter. And given what happened with Mac Jones in New England, I think the Patriots need that type of fresh start where they can just put J.J. McCarthy in right away.
Now that's a good point. Okay, so I have a very interesting decision here with Arizona because
Yes, you do.
I'm thinking about the number 6 pick with the Giants, and because you take JJ McCarthy, there's a strong argument to be made. The Giants at this point fly up the board. They offer Arizona more than Arizona can neglect, and they end up taking Drake May. However, as the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals, I'm here to announce that with the 4th pick in the 2024 championship rings mock draft, we select wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the Ohio State University. Arizona has had a history of very good wide receivers. Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden, you could even say DeAndre Hopkins for a few years there with Kyler Murray. I don't get. Listen, I think Malik Neighbors is a very good wide receiver. I think Roma Dunze is a very good wide receiver. I think Marvin Harrison is better than both of them, and I don't even think it's close. Marvin Harrison is not quarterback dependent. He looked great with CJ Stroud. He looked arguably even better with McCord last year. He's a guy that's got game speed that doesn't look like it's that fast on tape, but he blows by every wide receiver. And most importantly, in a college where all Ohio State had was 5-star wide receivers, Marvin Harrison clearly looked like the best. I think Arizona, who obviously Hollywood Brown is gone, DeAndre Hopkins has been gone, I believe Rondale Moore is gone as well to Atlanta. They need weapons, and to pair him up with an up-and-coming tight end in Trey McBride with a quarterback in Kyler Murray, who has been through sort of a cycle the last couple of years of we weren't really sure if he was a franchise quarterback. Then he got hurt. Then when he got healthy last year, he looked like he could be that franchise quarterback again. I think Arizona, there'd be a temptation there that you could get a receiver at 6 if you trade down 2 spots, but I'm all in on Harrison here at number 4.
I could make an argument that maybe the Cardinals should go with the offensive lineman Joe Alt from Notre Dame here to beef up that offensive line. I know they took the Ohio State offensive tackle last year. I think it was Paris Campbell, if I remember correctly. But as you've talked about, we don't know for sure if Kyler is their franchise quarterback. We've seen that cycle, and he has a history of injuries. You want to protect your franchise quarterback, see if he can really turn into something, beef up that offensive line.
I'll make the argument back at you though, is that Kyler is a mobile quarterback. We just spent draft capital last year on an offensive lineman. We can get offensive linemen, whether it's free agency or the draft, and we can sort of build it up. And it's not as important because we have a mobile quarterback and we need a wide receiver because I don't even know who our receivers are on the roster right now.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you bring up receivers because I'm on the clock now with the Los Angeles Chargers. And I know that Minnesota's going to be calling, and maybe the Giants want to move up 1 spot. Who knows? Maybe the Raiders try and call us. I got rid of Keenan Allen. I got rid of Mike Williams. I need weapons for my quarterback, Justin Herbert. So, with the 5th pick in the 2024 Championship Rings NFL Mock Draft, the LA Chargers select Malik Neighbors, wide receiver, LSU.
Okay, so I understand the thinking on this. I understand the Chargers need receivers. The one thing I'll say is this. I think Jim Harbaugh is a big believer in getting value, and I think the Chargers are going to have an advantage in the draft because their coaches came from college. And in my opinion, the Chargers, they just signed J.K. Dobbins. I believe they signed somebody else from Baltimore, I believe as well, who the name
Gus
of them.
Edwards?
Gus Edwards, yeah. So they brought in both Baltimore Raven running backs. And so I think what that's telling me is the Chargers want to turn it a Baltimore order, which is a ground and pound, do what a play action with Justin Herbert and reinvent sort of like what Greg Roman, who was Harbaugh's OC with Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco. Now he's there with them with the Chargers. Sort of do that kind of philosophy. And I think the Chargers need a defensive lineman. They need a corner. They could arguably use another safety. I think this is the spot. We'll talk about this when we talk about draft day trades. I absolutely think the Chargers are not making a pick here.
And I hear you on that. I totally get what you're saying with by bringing in both Baltimore running backs. But if you want to run that play action passing game, you need weapons to throw the ball to.
And I agree, and it makes total sense because you did lose Neighbors, or excuse me, you did lose Keenan Allen. Neighbors, the guy you drafted. You do lose Allen. You did lose Mike Williams. I just think Harbaugh's thinking this is such a receiver-rich class. I can move down, get more picks, and I can coach a receiver in the second or third round. And I don't want to spend top 5 money on a position that we may not be throwing the football a lot, even if we have Herbert.
Yeah. And again, I understand that. Like, we saw what type of offense Jim Harbaugh ran at Michigan with J.J. McCarthy, where they were mostly a ground and pound team, like what you were saying. And they only threw the ball when they really needed to. Granted, J.J. McCarthy made those big plays against Alabama late in that game when he needed to.
And the other factor, too, is, Josh, they have Quentin Johnson, who a lot of people did like in the draft. I didn't love as many other people, but I wonder if they think, we spent a first round pick on him last year. Let's not bring in another wide receiver in the first, maybe a second or a third, and let's see if we can develop him.
Yeah, I can understand that thought process, but by the same token, if you want Quentin Johnson to become your number 1 wide receiver, you can do that. But Malik Neighbors is just hard to pass up. We saw what he did for Jaden Daniels at LSU. No disrespect to Jaden Daniels, but I think a big part of the reason why he won the Heisman Trophy is because he was throwing it to Malik Neighbors at LSU.
The one thing I struggle with Neighbors is he's got elite speed. My biggest question for him is going to be, can he separate from press coverage in the NFL on a consistent basis? That's why I personally am a bigger fan of a Doomsday, even though he's not as fast, he's more of a technical route runner. He's a Keenan Allen actual type receiver. I'm actually higher on him than I am Neighbors, contrary to what a lot of people in the week say.
It's interesting that you bring up Rome Odunze. I'll get back to him when we get into our conversation of draft day trades.
Okay, so let me say this: if this happens, the Giants are running to the podium. They are selecting quarterback Drake May out of North Carolina. Now, I am not the biggest fan of Drake May. I've been on record on Brains World, been on record on this show of saying it. To me, he reminds me a little bit of Mitch Trubisky, reminds me a little bit of Zach Wilson, just so inconsistent, moves outside the pocket, even though he's not mobile, just gets outside the pocket a little bit too early for my liking. Is not refined necessarily. Now, Brian Dable's a great offensive coach, and he may be thinking there's some Josh Allen here with Drake May that I could get out of. But from all reports, the Giants have met with J.J. McCarthy. They have met with Drake May. They have met with Bo Nix, I believe, and Michael Penix, I think, as well. They are interested in getting a quarterback. And I think now, in this case, because I think if Neighbors is there, they probably just take Neighbors. But I think since Neighbors is gone, I think, and because May is still there, it's sort of a 2-factor thing. They absolutely do not pass on the opportunity. They stay at number 6, and they thought they could have had a trade up to 4 to get May. He dropped right in their lap here at 6, which they're very happy about.
Yes, and that's partially because the Patriots took J.J. McCarthy at 3. That certainly ties into it as well. But as I was saying, when the Patriots took J.J. McCarthy, Drake May, from what I've heard, is not NFL ready right now. Like, it may take him a season or two to get NFL ready.
And you
So,
have Daniel Jones on your roster. I would think you play Daniel Jones, and then by Thanksgiving, Drake May probably gets in there because we know Daniel Jones is not the franchise quarterback.
oh yeah, I mean the Giants have made that perfectly clear. So,
All right, so let's move to Tennessee now. You're back up on the clock, number 7.
yes. So, I don't think the Vikings are going to be calling us anymore. I don't think any of the quarterback needy teams are going to be calling unless they really want Bo Nix. So, the Titans are in an interesting position. They don't need a quarterback necessarily, although the jury is still out on Will Levis. There's an argument to be made for Roma Dunze here, but I need to protect Will Levis. So I'm going with the number 7 pick in the NFL mock draft for championship rings. I'm taking Joe Alt out of Notre Dame.
And this is the consensus pick. And I think it'd be a very good pick for Tennessee. I will give my thoughts. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I have a feeling, and if you watch my mock draft on Brains World, you would know where I'm going with this. I don't think Tennessee makes this pick. I'll say that.
So you have both the Chargers and the Titans trading out of their respective picks.
Yes, I do.
Interesting.
Now, at number 8, I know we'll get to this because you think Atlanta's the one that's moving out of this slot, and I
Yeah.
don't.
Yes.
I think Atlanta is taking the best defensive player on the board, which is edge rusher Dallas Turner out of Alabama. Atlanta's defense was very good last year, but what do they not have is a pass rusher. They have a new defensive coach in Raheem Morris. They obviously brought in Kirk Cousins in free agency. They spent a lot of draft capital on the offense side of the ball. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. Now they spend their resources on the defense side of the ball here. They get the best pass rusher in the draft. And the ironic thing here is, in this mock draft that we are doing here for championship rings, at pick number 8, this is the first defensive player off the board.
It is interesting. It does feel like defense is kind of becoming a lost art in the NFL, given all the new rules we have, especially with this hip drop tackle that's going into effect and, some of the other rules. So it'll be interesting to see how defensive play changes this coming season.
Well, last year was a very defensive heavy draft. If you remember, this is a very offensive top heavy draft. It's the complete opposite.
Yeah, and before I get to the Bears at number 9, let me just say this. I hope the quarterbacks in this draft work out better than the 2021 quarterback draft class because all but one of them has been traded.
So when you look back at that class, I'll just say this. I thought Zach Wilson was going to be a bust. I thought Mac Jones had a very low ceiling. I also thought I was not the biggest fan of Justin Fields, even though a lot of people were big fans of his. They thought he could turn Chicago around. I was never the biggest fan of Fields. The only one I'm actually surprised at was Trey Lance. And to me, you almost could see that coming as well because he didn't have a lot of college dirt. He didn't have a lot of tape. I just thought the raw upside, he could be like a Josh Allen, but clearly the injuries and things like that set him back. So everyone's so surprised that all 4 of these 5 quarterbacks got traded and they didn't work out. But to me, when you take a look and you go back at that draft, Trevor Lawrence was the only for sure thing. The rest had question marks. I think the difference is with this class, there's better upside and there's better situations these guys can go into right now and succeed.
You know what I would compare the 2021 draft QB draft class to? The 2018 quarterback draft class.
Because Baker is still a very serviceable quarterback. Josh Allen home run and Lamar Jackson home run. They had 3 hits in the first round.
Right, but like we were talking about how Josh Rosen could be a very good quarterback coming out.
I'm going to stop you right there because I never said that. I thought Josh Rosen was going to be the biggest bust wherever he went.
I'm not saying you were saying that, but I feel like that was a lot of the conversation.
Oh, it was a conversation, and I had said flat out, Josh Rose is not an NFL quarterback.
And a lot of that was being said about Sam Darnold. And
Who I also said is not an NFL quarterback.
I
I,
feel like
I what have I been telling you? I actually have a history. Now, last year I whipped. It looks like I whipped on Bryce Young. He was the rare whip I have. I am very good. I don't watch as much college football as you or many of these analysts, but I can turn on 5 plays. I can tell you if the guy's going to play or not.
I I can I try to get a pretty good idea of that. But anyway, getting back to this mock draft, Roma Dunze is still available. I need to get Caleb Williams a weapon. This is a no-brainer. So, with the 9th pick in the 2024 Championship Rings NFL mock draft, the Chicago Bears select Roma Dunze, wide receiver, Washington.
Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Roma Dunse, Cole Kmet, Khalil Herbert. Chicago has a loaded offensive weaponry now in that case for Caleb.
Yes, but again, it all comes down to their offensive coordinator. Can he develop a system that fits Caleb's skill set? That's my biggest question.
Well, the Jets' offensive coordinator's name is Nathaniel Hackett. He makes Aaron Rodgers laugh when they play darts together. And there's this thought out here that this is a tackle-rich draft. The Jets need to get an offensive lineman. The Jets are not going offensive line. I'm here to tell all you people. There's a reason why they signed Morgan Moses from the Ravens at right tackle. They signed another Baltimore offensive lineman to play guard. They signed Tyron Smith at left tackle from the Cowboys. All of that because they were going all in on Aaron Rodgers this year. They have Garrett Wilson. They have Mike Williams. Guess what? They lost their tight end, CJ Uzama. And so with the number 10 overall pick and the last pick of this championship rings mock draft, the New York Jets, they're going down south to Georgia and selecting tight end Brock Bowers.
I like it. He was fantastic with Stetson Bennett as his quarterback at Georgia, and we saw what he did last year. So this is a no-brainer.
To recap here, we had no trades in our mock top 10. We have Caleb to Chicago, Jaden to Washington, J.J. McCarthy goes to New England, Marvin Harrison, Arizona, Malik Neighbors to the Chargers, Drake May then kind of slides down to the Giants at 6, Tennessee takes Joel, Dallas Turner will go to Atlanta, Roma Dunze in a little bit of a slide falls right into Chicago's lap at 9, and you can make an argument Brock Bowers is just who the Jets order at number 10.
So I know we're not moving on, but if I'm the Denver Broncos at 11, I'm taking Bo Nix out of Oregon.
Well, they would not be at 11. They would be at 12. Minnesota is next.
Oh, yeah. You're right. My bad. I mixed up Minnesota and Denver. But could there be a scenario where Denver tries to trade up into that top 10 to jump in front of Minnesota?
I would not trade, and I like Bo Nix. I'm not trading into the top 10 for Bo Nix. And I think one of the reasons why, and let's get into this trade movement now. One of the reasons why they acquired Zach Wilson yesterday, I think, is because Denver is thinking we could trade back and get Bo Nix at 16, 17. And even if we don't get him or Michael Penix, we can be okay for a year tanking and going with Zach Wilson and Jared Stidham. Now, it's a risk because we don't know what the quarterback class is going to be next year. But Sean Payton is an offensive coach, and I think that's the way he sees it, is he can work with almost any quarterback.
Yeah, but given what you just said, we don't know what the quarterback class is going to look like next season. If you're Denver, I don't feel comfortable sticking with Zach Wilson as my starting quarterback.
Well, there's also a world, too, where they go after a Spencer Rattler in the second or third round as well.
That is definitely true. But, yeah, as you mentioned, I don't think Atlanta's going to be picking at number 8. I told you this last week. I think it's the Indianapolis Colts are going to trade up into the top 10, specifically at that number 8 pick with Atlanta to jump in front of Chicago because I think the Colts want to get another weapon for Anthony Richardson, and his name is Rome Odunze.
So, and you know I'm a big fan of wide receivers, but I'm going to tell you why I would not do this if I was the Colts. I think Michael Pittman is a very good, solid, low end wide receiver, one high end number two. If I did not have Michael Pittman, I absolutely would make this move on the Colts. But I also have him. I have Alec Pierce. And when I take a look at it, I have a guy in Anthony Richardson who's extremely mobile. I also have a great running back in Jonathan Taylor. My problem is not my offense. I also have a great offensive coach in Shane Steichen. My problem is defense, and there's a lot of great corners in this draft, which I need more than a receiver. And also, Roma Dunse is not a burner. If it was for Malik Neighbors to complement Pittman, that I would understand. But I think Roma Dunse and Pittman are sort of the same wide receiver. And I don't know if I would want that. Even though I'm an offensive guy and I love receivers, I think if I'm the Colts, I have more pressing needs. And again, this receiver class is so deep, I can get one in the second or third round.
I hear you, but as I was telling you last week, when the Colts had success with Peyton Manning as their starting quarterback, when they had Andrew Luck as their starting quarterback, a big reason for that was because they had a lot of skill position players surrounding him. You had Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Dallas Clark, Joseph Adai, guys like that. The more weapons you can surround Anthony Richardson with, I think you're putting him in a real position to succeed.
I think it's a different situation. Well, I agree with you. I think it's a different situation than like a Chicago, where you're already there at 9. If Roma Dunze is there, you take him. In the Indianapolis case, it's do I have to give up a second next year or even a first next year to move up 7 spots, which is a big jump, just to get a wide receiver, a very good wide receiver that is probably a low end 1 or a high end 2. I don't think that premium price personally is worth it.
I don't know why, but I'm just like fully convinced myself that it's going to happen. But the, you know, as you mentioned, we had our full mock draft, no trades in the top 10. But everybody's talking about Minnesota's the team to watch out for. But it all depends on, I think it really depends on what New England does with that number 3 pick.
So this is the trade that no one's talking about that I alluded to earlier that I had in my personal mock draft.
Let's hear it.
I think the Tennessee Titans at number 7 are moving back. And in a shock to everybody, the Las Vegas Raiders jump up 6 spots ahead of Denver. They go up to number 7. They're not taking Drake May. He would be already gone. They're not taking JJ McCarthy. They're not taking Bo Nix. They're going to take Michael Penix out of Washington. Yep, that is their guy. That is Antonio Pierce's guy who had history with him, coached with him at some level, I believe, in high school. They're not as concerned about the injury history, I believe. He's a great thrower of the football. You got Devontae Adams. You got Jacoby Myers there. You got Michael Mayer there, who's a very good tight end. You're in a division with Andy Reid and Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton. You make your move. You play chess. And for the record, contrary to what everybody else also believes, I actually think there is a chance that the way the draft board falls the way I think it will, Joe Alt will still be there at 13 for the Tennessee Titans to take. I think he could actually slide a little bit because of the way the board sets up.
It's interesting that you bring up the Raiders possibly being the team to move up because, as you talked about, they're in the division with Patrick Mahomes. They're in the division with Justin Herbert. The Raiders cannot fall behind. If you want to stay competitive in the AFC West, you got to get the quarterback position right. Think about all the assets the Raiders gave up to go get Devontae Adams. You want to make sure that actually turns out to be like a good trade or a great trade rather than a complete miss. So
And
getting
by
the
the way, for the record, in that scenario, I have Denver sitting at 12 and still taking Bo Nix.
interesting.
I have 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12.
Okay.
And I also think Minnesota does trade up to 5 with the Chargers, who would move back to 11. And I think McCarthy goes there to Minnesota at 5. New England takes May at 3.
See, I could totally see New England taking Drake May at 3. It just felt like, since from everything I've heard, JJ McCarthy is more NFL ready, and I feel like he's so accustomed to the conditions he would face in Foxborough based on his play in the Big Ten. For me it makes sense to New England.
I don't care much about conditions. When in the NFL, I care about what's around you. So to me, whoever goes to Minnesota, whether it's Drake May, McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, whoever goes there is going to work, and they're going to work immediately.
Well, yeah, because you got Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and you're in a dome.
There you go. New England, whoever goes there, good freaking luck. Now, by the way, if Washington takes Drake May, New England shouldn't even consider. New England should run up to the podium and take Jane Daniels.
So, I'm actually going to surprise you a bit. If Washington does, in fact, take Drake May, if I'm the Raiders, I'm immediately trying to trade up to number 3 with New England to get Jane.
Which I agree if you're the Raiders, but if I'm New England, I'm shutting my phone off. Because I need that quarterback to stay competitive in my division as well. And we didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to be there. That's why I'm running up to the phone.
I like it. I'm trying to... Do you think the Giants, I know they're at 6, could they try and trade up into like the top 4?
If anything, they would try with Arizona. And Arizona, I think, might do it depending on what the Giants are willing to give up. But if I'm Arizona, I'm taking Marvin Harrison. And again, I'm not thinking twice about it.
Arizona is one of the more fascinating picks in this draft because we've seen what the Cardinals have done in the past.
I think Marvin Harrison will be a top 8 wide receiver next year.
Right. And what I was saying was, we've seen last year the Cardinals make a trade with the Houston Texans. They move down, and then Arizona trades back up and goes to get Paris Campbell. So the Cardinals are not. I don't know how to say this.
They have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
But I think number 1, the best player on the board, and it's Harrison.
Yes. Arizona has a history of moving down to come back up. That's what I was trying to say.